Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about finding the right set of rules. So this week's talking point is a subject that has come up before, but was included in the last batch of subscriber questions, and therefore I thought it worth touching on again. So Kalistosprom, I hope I've pronounced that right, asked, as someone who has come from a Warhammer background, I've been finding it overwhelming going through so many historical rule sets. Where do you start? So it's an interesting question that can give even the experienced historical wargamer a bit of a headache, to be honest. There are quite literally thousands of rule sets to choose from, and if you've come from a company with only a handful of games on offer as its core selection, the variety can seem mind-boggling. Picking the right rule set seems like it should be nigh on impossible. But you can narrow the choice by asking yourself some really simple questions first. It may still leave the newbie Warhammer with a wide selection of rules to choose from, but rather than thousands we could be looking at dozens, and hopefully this shortish list will mean you find what you want much quicker. So the first important question to ask is, what period do you want to play? You need to be certain that you are picking the right period for you. Now, Warhammer players may have decades of lore and fictional history to draw on, but historical source material is virtually unlimited by comparison. So pick a period that genuinely excites and interests you, and you'll never be short of inspirational books, films, museums, etc. All of it can feed your new addiction. And if you aren't passionate about the period you choose, then you're unlikely to see it through, even if you do find a good rule set. Once you have picked a period, you could just as easily be overwhelmed by the options within that period, even before looking for a set of rules. So I recommend focusing on a particular campaign or a single battle until you've got a wider understanding of the period that you're playing and get some ideas for where you want to go next. Now the second step is to decide what size game you want to play. Are you the kind of wargamer who enjoys big battles across large tables? Or do you like skirmish, small unit tactics? Knowing your period will help you recognise what excites you and whether you want to play corps, brigade, regimental, company or even platoon level actions. Smaller skirmish games are a great way to get started in historicals, but there is something epic with big battles on big tables. There are rules for every option, and knowing what you want, what size game you want to play, can help you to weed out the systems that aren't suitable for you. Now the third important question is, what scale do you want to collect? So for example, 2mm and 6mm are perfect for big battles in the age of large formed units. 15mm is often the go-to range for wargamers wanting to play brigade or regimental level games, and 28mm obviously works really well for company or smaller games and for skirmish level games. But these aren't hard and fast rules, just generalisations, and of course you can do what you want. Many modern historical rules are scale agnostic, but there is a world of difference between 6mm and 28mm wargaming, and choosing a scale can help you narrow the field of when you're picking the rule set that you want to play with. Now as an aside, before we go on to other questions, it's also worth addressing the specifics of this question, namely the Warhammer player who wants to break into historical wargaming. Although every rule set will have its absolute purist players, it's common these days for players to have a lot of freedom to adapt rules and to make personal choices about how they are going to use a rule system. To the experienced historical player this may sound obvious, but if you've come from only playing Warhammer, locked into one set of rules and the latest codex, where straying from the official line is nigh on heresy, this is a whole new minefield for you to navigate. So while I'm listing questions you need to be asking yourself, remember that you should always have the freedom to ad lib. So for example, don't ignore a set of rules because they are billed as being designed for one scale when you want to use a different scale. Maybe you've been inspired by a particular range from a particular manufacturer, but unlike playing Warhammer, you are free to buy figures from a range of manufacturers. Now one caveat I would add here is watch out for compatibility of ranges, and by that I mean stood side by side, do the proportions and figure heights look approximately the same. Just because two ranges are billed as 28mm doesn't necessarily mean they're actually the same size. Anyway, I'm just digressing. By this point you may have made some decisions about the period you want to play, what size game you want to explore, and what scale you want to collect and paint. But there are other questions that you can also ask yourself which can help you to narrow the field for possible rule sets on offer. Consider factors like how complex the rules are, for example. If you've come from a 40k background, then I suspect complexity is not an issue, but maybe you want more of a beer and pretzels type game that can be played easily in an evening. Again, there will be plenty of choices, but a quick flick through of the rules or a read of forums and reviews online will give you an idea of how complicated a rule set really is. Now, you may also want to consider the cost of the rules and any of the accessories that you may need to play that set of rules. Maybe you found your Games Workshop habit was becoming an unsustainable expense and want something lighter on the wallet. So look at the setup costs of buying into a new system. Now, as a predominantly 6mm player, I can heartily recommend the One True Scale as a cost-effective route into big battles, but that will depend on how you answered questions 1 and 2, of course. Other factors to consider when looking for new rule sets include: are they well supported? Is there an online community of players who can help you with advice and tips? Can those rules be played solo? Do any of your mates want to play, or are you going to have to do both sides yourself? Now, by this point you may be thinking that all this sounds like a lot of homework, and you're right to a certain extent, but once you've found the right period in the right scale and you have a potential obsession that can last a lifetime, and getting the decisions right early on can save you a lot of time and money. There are lots of sources of information, advice and reviews that you can read and explore, all of which can help you make the right choice. So, look at hobby magazines, blogs, yes, they still exist, YouTube, of course, Facebook groups, hobby forums. You'll inevitably get everyone and their dog telling you how great the rule set is that they play, but you'll also get a lot of pointers to games that you've never even heard of. So obviously today's talking point is aimed at the potential new recruit to historical wargaming. Picking the right period, deciding what size games you want to play, and in what scale will narrow the field of available rule sets enormously. But asking yourself other questions and knowing the answer can also stop you going down disappointing cul-de-sacs. However, many of the regular viewers of this channel are old grognards like me and probably have their own views on how best to find a set of rules. So as is my usual practice, I want to throw this out to you and ask, what advice would you give to a Warhammer player who wants to find a foot in historical wargaming? How would you guide this poor lost soul away from the clutches of the evil empire and into the wider world of tabletop wargames? As always, I would love to hear your thoughts, opinions and advice in the comments below. So now we have time for a hobby update. So last weekend I attended Doing the Lambeth Lard, hosted by the South London Warlords. This was the first time I've done a Lardy Day and I had an absolute blast, a really good time. I started the day playing some sharp practice, but of course I came at it from the having never played this set of rules before. Our host and umpire did a great job of running the game and ushered me through the various twists and turns of the rules, and my opponent was gracious in his eventual victory. I was able to get a really good feel for the rules, and having played Chain of Command before, I could see a lot of similarities in terminology and concepts. Now, I thought I had the upper hand at the start of this game, with my American militia being particularly effective with their fire. However, the British pressed forward and were eventually able to force a retreat from one of the objectives that they were going after, a farmhouse that I was using to store ammunition, and on my other flank had pretty much destroyed my troops who were trying to protect the guns. When the end came, it was swift and decisive, and I think we all thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. For the afternoon session, I took it a little bit easier by playing Water Tanker, a rule set that I'm pretty familiar with. However, this game used hex terrain to simplify movement, and I can definitely see possibilities for this in remote gaming. I mean, back at the start of COVID, when we had the first lockdown, I ran a Water Tanker game on Zoom for the rejects, with 2 cameras, 4 players and a serious amount of swearing as we tried to make it work. We did indeed have a great game, but it would have been a lot easier with movement on hex terrain, so that's certainly something for us to think about. Now, I took part in 2 Water Tanker games against different opponents, and again I had a really good time. It was nice to play against a different range of players and just talk about our love of the hobby, and I would definitely consider doing another Lardy event with the Warlords. The only downside, it has to be said, was the journey. The 90-minute journey each way with no seat for most of the journey reminded me of why I hate using public transports. Certainly my legs and my knees were killing me by the time I got home. Not the warlord's fault, of course, and if I do a return visit, I would look more closely for the local parking and just take the car. I'd rather drive than suffer the journey on the train, frankly. Now today, as this video goes out, I'll be at Partisan in Newark. 4 of the rejects, including myself, will be there taking in the usual high standard of the games. It's a bit of a trek for us, especially for the lads coming from south of the river, but always worth the visit. The quality of the games on display is always very high, and the conversation flows easily all day long. As I will be doing some of the driving, it's unlikely that I will have my video out of the show out quite as quickly as I did with my salute video, but I will try and get it out within a couple of days. Now, time for a very quick workbench update. As usual, I haven't painted much over the last few weeks, but I have amazingly got something finished this week. And perhaps unsurprisingly, it's yet more 6mm buildings from Slug Industries. So again, I've gone for some small, relatively modest tiled cottages and a rather nice barn. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I've still got some of those 6mm buildings left over. But I've got a feeling there's probably a town battle or something on the cards at some point in the future. So I'm just going to keep pushing forward, painting some of these figures, and there's still quite a few left for me to do. Well, that's all we have time for this week, and as always, I'll sign off by asking, please join the conversation in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share, and if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.